R2 and I recently returned from our first road trip to a small event in Fairhaven, Vermont, which was my first chance to operate R2 around the general public and, more importantly, around kids. As you can see, I've got him dismantled so I can more closely see how well he's holding up. Being a 3D printed droid, there's concern that some parts might fatigue or wear over time, so it's a good idea to conduct a close inspection after each event so you can stay on top of any needed repairs. So even though it was a short event, just a couple of hours, I learned a lot about operating R2 and figured I would share my thoughts on that with you, as well as talk about the things that went well and the things that didn't go so well. First, here are the key things I've learned so far about operating R2. Granted, it's limited experience, but nonetheless. Have a wingman or a roadie with you if at all possible, especially for outdoor events where the environment or the terrain might vary a lot. If R2 gets hung up on a bump, it's hard to nudge him free while holding the controllers, so let your assistant help get him free. They can also be there to take pictures and videos, something that I overlooked for this event, and so sadly I don't have as much to show as I wish I did. If possible, scout the location before the event. Knowing what to expect is never a bad thing, and being able to identify problematic terrain, areas to avoid, questionable pavement, or challenging thresholds ahead of time will help you avoid these trouble spots when there might be a lot more people and other distractions that will keep you from noticing them in the moment. Bring almost all the tools. You should be prepared to handle, repair, or MacGyver your way out of anything short of a catastrophic failure. In addition to my full supply of Allen keys, wrenches, and screwdrivers, I had hot glue, duct tape, spare wire, spare connectors, spare fuses, hobby knives, shop towels, some random fasteners, etc. You're already transporting a bulky Astromech, so why skimp on the toolbox? And then finally, and this kind of surprised me, but try and remember to step back and let things happen organically. I know it's nerve-wracking having strangers so close to something you've put so much time and effort into, but try not to hover. Let them discover and experience R2 in their own way. It can be magical not only for children, but for adults as well. Remember, being around R2 is old hat to us, but for most everyone else, this is a first-time experience. So how did R2 hold up? Overall, he held up really, really well. The foot shells are notorious for taking the brunt of the damage when you're out there operating R2. I did get a little bit of a paint scuff along that edge there, and then the bottom of some of the foot shells scraped along some gravel and bumpy pavement, but really that's nothing that anyone's really going to be able to see. I do have a few paint chips here and there. The corner of the booster cover there took a little bit of a hit at some point, but really nothing that's terribly obvious. There is a lot of dirt. I will be disassembling the drives to give them good cleaning, as well as for some other reasons, which I'll get into in a little bit. The other thing that I was really pleased with was my main power switch. I had been concerned with this being a breaker type switch that any significant vibrations might trip it. Over the course of the day, R2 did travel across some pretty bumpy gravel and some pretty rough pavement. He was shaking and bouncing all over the place, but never once did that switch trip. So overall, I'm really happy with how that switch has worked out for me. So yeah, I mean, otherwise, you know, from a durability standpoint, he was outside. It was a bright sunny day. I really wasn't worried about the heat. He worked out really, really well. And yeah, so that all worked out really well. Let's talk a little bit about what didn't go so well. Well, it's been said that you really don't know something's limit until you push beyond it. And unfortunately, that's what I did with R2's drives. Between the gravel path that we were on and the rough pavement, I hit a couple of spots, and both the main axle and the center spindle that holds this intermediate gear, both of those snapped on both of the drives. I actually heard kind of a weird clicking noise in his left foot, and a few minutes later, the same sound coming from his right foot, and that's about the time that he just stopped moving. Um, I was crushed at first, but thankfully we just rolled him off to a spot. And even though he was stationary, he was a huge success, a huge hit. Everyone really liked it. But clearly, though, looking back at this, I still have the original 3D printed main axle, and this was something that I frankly overlooked. This is definitely the weak part of the drive. And so I've already got in motion some replacements and some upgrades. I'm not going to dwell on this too much right now because I hope in the next week I'm going to be able to put out a video where I'm going to go over all of the modifications that I've done with axles and other 3D printed parts that I've replaced with hardware. And these main drives are going to be no exception. Overall, though, I mean, the gears themselves held up really well. They're dirty, but they're not warped. They're not at all damaged. The bearings are looking pretty good. Everything else is looking good. And I've already vacuumed this one. This one was really pretty dirty. But yeah, so that was unfortunate. But as I said, one of the coolest things about having R2 out there is he draws attention no matter what. And overall, I have to say I was really impressed with the behavior of the kids and the adults for that matter. But really, I was able to, as I mentioned before, just kind of stand back. It's one of the nice things about having the stealth controllers is you're able to kind of stand back and just kind of blend into the crowd. And there were a few times where kids dragged their parents up to R2 and they were showing him and he was reacting. And I saw the parents kind of looking around and wondering who's controlling this. And eventually they would spot me and I'd kind of nod back to them. And it was just really, really cool. A lot of the kids, just wanted, when I opened up his dome panels, the kids just wanted to look inside. They didn't really touch anything. They didn't grab anything. I did have to take his restraining bolt off after a while once someone discovered that it could come off and couldn't figure out quite how to put it back on. But it was just so much fun. So overall, I'd have to say that road tripping with R2-D2 is a hell of a lot of fun. And in the immortal words of Ferris Bueller, it is so choice. If you have the means, I highly recommend it. Thanks all for watching. I'll see you next time.